I think it's a situation where it's basically just educating the 3PLs in the big and bulky world as to, hey, you don't fit within this box that they're trying to put you in as it relates to a traditional truck broker. And so there's things you need to pay attention to. There's questions you need to ask, and there's questions that your broker should be asking, right? Like, so for instance, I know Lowe's, and in most cases, in order to do business with Lowe's in this space, you sign a trailer interchange agreement of which you're leasing vehicles from Lowe's, and in turn, you're going to sublease that to your ICC network. Well, because you have that lease agreement with Lowe's, you're putting yourself in a primary position on those autos. Your contingent auto policy that you have is not going to cover that exposure when an ICC improperly insures that vehicle, right? You might request them to carry non-hired insurance if they can find it. You might request them to schedule the unit on their policy, assuming they're going to be in the same vehicle every single day, which isn't necessarily the case when they show up at the lot at Lowe's and they kind of have their pick which vehicle they can get into. And it presents a problem because in those situations, you're primary. You could be primary when that vehicle is dropped off at the lot for the night from the ICC, and it's back in your care, custody, control, technically, so it's not a good situation. And ultimately, it's a situation where these are the kind of conversations you have to be having with your broker, say, look, I'm a freight broker, but we do this. And you got to have a broker that really understands your niche, because let's face it, guys, this is a niche within a niche. The big and bulky space is a niche unto itself. And you need a broker that speaks these languages and say, wait, time out. You're doing business with who? Then let's make sure we have the proper adequate coverage in place, because here's why. And so, I mean, I've seen situations even as well where some of these carriers on the contingent auto side point back to, and Adam, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, point back to the service agreement between the 3PL and the shipper, whereas the shipper's agreement calls out the 3PL as acting as a motor carrier. And so the agreement actually says between the shipper and the 3PL, you are a motor carrier on behalf of X shipper. Well, yep. In that situation, the contingent auto policy says, wait a minute, time out. We read this agreement. There's a loss here. It says you're a motor carrier for them. We don't have coverage for you for a motor carrier. We have coverage for you as a freight broker. Claim decline. So have you seen that kind of language, Adam?
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why it's called contingent auto liability coverage, right? Is because freight brokers, by definition, do not have a primary automobile liability exposure, right? They don't own assets. They're not operating vehicles or trucks, right? And so they have a contingent exposure. And so if they're signing agreements and agreeing to liability that falls outside of the traditional freight brokerage role, then that's a problem, and they're likely going to run into issues. I mean, almost every single contingent auto policy on the marketplace is going to have exclusions for situations where they're holding themselves out by accepting enhanced liability or assuming liability in a contract. If they're doing these things, they're now putting their insurance company in a position to where they're going to have to respond on a primary basis, and that's not what the coverage was intended to do, right? It's not
nor how it was priced, right?
It's not priced that way either. Correct, yeah. Right?
Well, I would think that the companies probably will take objection to having to respond in a primary fashion too, and maybe in the case of denying coverage and/or looking to go back after the insured for not disclosing certain facts along the way in the underwriting process.
Yep. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a situation